a quiet archive record. Tonight, we're stepping into a slow unfolding. Settle in, let the outside world dissolve, and gently descend into tonight's world. In the mid-1990s, a new creature name spread through the Americas with unusual speed. It was not a legend from deep time, like werewolves or dragons, and it was not a local ghost story that stayed in one valley. It was a fresh, modern monster, shaped by television, rumor, fear for farm animals, and the hard reality of dead livestock found at dawn. The name was Chupacabra, a word that means goat sucker. Reports ranged from careful descriptions to wild claims, and the evidence ranged from real carcasses to blurry photos to eyewitness memories made under stress. Tonight, we will treat it like an investigation. We will separate the repeatable facts from the wishful thinking. We will look at the best cases, what experts tested, what could be explained, and what still feels unresolved to some people. Tonight, we go through the Chupacabra investigation. Begin with the name, because names can mislead. The word Chupacabra sounds ancient, like something whispered in Spanish villages for centuries, but the term became popular in the 1990s. It entered the public ear at a moment when tabloid TV was strong, when talk radio was loud, and when home video cameras were becoming common. A creature can be born in that kind of world, not by evolving in a forest, but by evolving in the human mind. The core claim, in its simplest form, is this: something attacks livestock, often goats and chickens, sometimes sheep, rabbits, and other small animals. The animals are found dead. People say the bodies have puncture wounds. People say the bodies look drained of blood. People say the killer is not a dog or a wildcat. Then the story spreads. Farm to farm, town to town, island to mainland. What makes a case strong, if we are trying to be fair, is not how scary it sounds. A strong case is one where the timeline is clear, the location is known, the body was examined quickly, the wounds were measured, and ideally, samples were taken and tested. A strong case is also one where we can compare it to known animal attacks in the same region, because most livestock deaths are caused by ordinary predators, disease, and mistakes in husbandry. There is another reason we have to be careful. Livestock killings are emotional. A goat is not just meat. It can be a family's income, milk for children, or a prized breeding animal. When a farmer finds several animals dead, the mind searches for a pattern. If neighbors are also losing animals, fear becomes a shared language. A new name, like Chupacabra, can become a container for that fear. Before the Chupacabra, there were earlier reports in the Americas of mysterious livestock deaths. In the 1970s and 1980s, some regions talked about vampire animals, strange big cats, or cult activity. There were also older myths about creatures that drink blood. So when the 1990s reports arrived, the public already had a mental shelf for the idea. The case that most people point to as the spark is Puerto Rico in 1995. In the town of Canovanas and in other areas, residents reported animals killed in ways they believed were unusual. People described a creature that was not like a coyote. They described something that stood upright, with spines, with large eyes. Some said it moved like a kangaroo. This image, the bipedal reptilian or alien-like Chupacabra, became the most famous version. When you study that 1995 wave, you see a pattern that repeats in many monster flaps. There are a few dramatic reports. Then the media amplifies them. Then more people begin to interpret ordinary events through the new frame. Soon, any dead chicken can become part of the same story. But even if you believe the flap grew through rumor, that does not automatically mean nothing happened. Real livestock were killed. Real people saw something, even if that something was a dog, a mongoose, a wildcat, or a trick of light. The job is to look for the parts that stay solid when the noise is stripped away. We should also talk about what people mean when they say drained of blood. A body can appear bloodless for several reasons. Blood can pool inside the body. Blood can leak into the ground. Scavengers can open the abdomen, and the mess can be carried away by insects and animals. Dehydration after death can change the look of tissue, and a person seeing a carcass at dawn with shock and anger in their body can easily feel that it looks empty. In a real forensic investigation, the first step is simple documentation. Take clear photos, measure and record the wounds, note whether there is tearing, bruising, or crushing. Look for tracks. Look for hair, scat, saliva, or drag marks. If possible, call a veterinarian or a wildlife officer quickly. In many Chupacabra cases, this did not happen. The body was buried, burned, or left for scavengers. That leaves only stories. Still, there are a few kinds of evidence that keep coming back. First, there are puncture wounds in pairs. Many predators leave paired punctures. Dogs, coyotes, and foxes have canines that can create two main holes. Cats can do the same. Even rats can leave paired marks. The spacing matters. The depth matters. The location matters. A goat killed by a dog is often bitten on the throat, but also on legs and flanks, and there may be tearing. A goat killed by a big cat might show punctures on the neck and crushing damage to the windpipe. A small animal killed by a weasel might have small punctures behind the head. Second, there are reports of clean wounds with little tearing. This can happen if the attacker has a clean bite and the animal does not struggle long. It can also happen if the body is found after rigor and drying, when torn edges look neat. Third, there is the claim that many animals were killed in one night. Dogs on a killing spree can do this. So can coyotes. A predator can enter a pen and panic a flock. The result can look like a massacre. Fourth, there are the odd-looking bodies that people find and then photograph. This is where the modern Chupacabra changed shape. On the mainland, especially in the southern United States and northern Mexico, the most common image became a hairless canine with mange. These animals have rough skin, thin tails, and a sick, sharp look. People saw them and called them chupacabras because they looked unnatural. So already we have at least two chupacabras. One is the Puerto Rico style, upright and spiny. The other is the mange coyote style, on four legs like a sick dog. If a creature has two very different bodies, that is usually a warning sign. It suggests we are dealing with a label, not a species. The label can be applied to any unknown animal and to any unexplained death. Now, to find the best evidence, we can focus on a few categories. One category is the original Puerto Rico reports, because they are the source of the bipedal description and because they involved many animal deaths. The challenge is that many of those reports were not examined with modern forensic care, and the stories were tangled with media. Another category is the body evidence in the United States, because in several cases, actual carcasses of suspected chupacabras were collected and tested. These are strong in the sense that we can check DNA and anatomy. A third category is the repeated pattern of livestock wounds in Latin America, especially in places where small farmers have limited access to veterinary forensics. Here we have many reports, but fewer lab results. We will move through these categories slowly. Start with Puerto Rico, 1995. The story often centers on a woman named Madeline Tolentino, who described seeing a creature in Canovanas. Her description helped set the template. She spoke about a creature that was about 3 to 4 feet tall, with spikes down its back and large eyes. Many people later echoed parts of that image. An important detail, often discussed by skeptics, is that the same year, a science fiction horror film called Species was released, and some noted similarities between the movie creature and the early Chupacabra descriptions. Similar does not mean identical, but it raises a question. Did the movie shape memory? Human memory is not a video recording. It is a reconstruction. When people try to describe something strange, the brain reaches for familiar shapes. This does not mean the witnesses lied. It means the mind may have used available images to fill gaps. When animals were found dead, people reported puncture wounds, often on the neck or chest. Some reports said there were 3 holes. Some said 2. Some said more. Some said the bodies were drained. Some said there was no sign of struggle. Without consistent forensic reports, it is hard to treat these as data points. But we can still ask what predators exist in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico does not have coyotes. It has dogs, cats, mongooses, rats, and birds of prey. Wild dogs can kill goats. Mongooses can kill poultry. A dog can also be an efficient killer and leave punctures. Another possibility raised in some cases is disease and poisoning, because animals can die without visible injuries, and scavengers can later leave marks that are misread as the cause of death. Still, the strength of Puerto Rico is not the lab evidence. Its strength is cultural. It shows how fast a new creature concept can spread, and how it can become a shared explanation during a stressful wave of events. Now move to the United States body evidence, because this is where we get DNA. In the 2000s, several strange-looking canids were killed or found, especially in Texas. Photos spread online. People called them chupacabras because they were hairless and had long snouts and odd skin. In multiple cases, scientists tested them. The results usually pointed to coyotes, dogs, or hybrids, often with severe mange. Mange is caused by mites, and it can strip fur, thicken skin, and weaken the animal. A mange coyote can look like a different species. It may also behave differently. A sick animal may approach farms, take easier prey, and be more active at odd times. These DNA-tested bodies are some of the best evidence we have, because they are concrete. And what they show is that many modern Chupacabra sightings are not unknown creatures at all. They are known animals in bad condition. But that does not fully explain the older Puerto Rico style, and it does not explain every livestock death claim, because a mange coyote is still a coyote. If a farmer says, "I have lived here for 40 years, and I know what coyote kills look like," we should still consider that there may be unusual patterns in some events. So what would count as the best evidence for something beyond known predators? It would be a body that cannot be matched to a known species, with clear anatomy and with DNA that does not match known animals. It would be consistent wound patterns that do not match known predator behavior, with lab-confirmed blood loss or unusual toxicology. It would be repeatable across cases. In practice, we do not have that. We have suggestive patterns and a few strong, mundane explanations. Still, people keep the legend alive because there are details that feel strange. One detail is the claim of bloodless bodies. In veterinary pathology, if an animal truly lost most of its blood, you would expect a mess, because blood is not a tidy liquid under pressure. A predator that drains blood would need a method to prevent spillage, to extract, and to do it quickly. That is difficult. Most predators do not do that. Another detail is the claim of small, clean punctures with no tearing. But again, a bite can leave clean holes, and skin can tighten as it dries. Another detail is the fear reaction. People sometimes report that dogs would not approach, or that the air felt wrong. Fear can prime the senses. It can also change how time feels. We will now take the investigation deeper by looking at how livestock attacks are usually misread. A goat found dead with 2 holes in the neck may have been killed by a dog that bit and held. Later, scavengers may open the body, changing the scene. A chicken found dead with small holes may have been killed by a mongoose or a weasel. A rabbit found dead without much damage may have died of stress or disease, and then been bitten by rats. Farmers often do not see the attack. They see the end result. The end result is messy and confusing. In some reports, people said the animal's organs were missing, or the body was cut cleanly. This often happens when scavengers and insects have time to work, and when the body is found after several hours. If we want the best evidence, we should look for the cases where the body was found quickly and examined. One widely discussed modern case is in Texas in the mid-2000s, where a rancher killed a hairless creature. The body was tested and it came back as a coyote with mange. This happened more than once. Each time, the internet had already decided it was a chupacabra. These cases are important because they show a process. People see an unfamiliar animal. They apply a known scary label. The label spreads faster than the lab result. But if the lab result is correct, then the best evidence for chupacabra in those cases is actually evidence for how myths spread. So we return to the question, if most bodies are canids, and if many livestock deaths are ordinary, why do some people still feel there is more? Part of it is that the chupacabra is a modern myth that fits modern anxieties. It sits at the edge of science fiction, conspiracy, and nature. People have suggested it is an escaped experiment, an alien pet, a demon, a mutant. These ideas are flexible. They can absorb any new detail. Also, the chupacabra is a story about the boundary between home and wilderness. A farm pen is a place of control. When something breaks in and kills, it feels like a violation. A monster name gives shape to that feeling. Now we will follow the evidence trail into Latin America and northern Mexico, where reports have been frequent. In parts of Mexico, especially rural areas, farmers have reported animals killed with punctures and little blood. Sometimes the reports involve many animals over a short period. Sometimes they involve tracks that people say do not match dogs. Sometimes they involve a sighting of a small creature. The strongest cases here would be those where authorities took samples. In many cases, they did not. Sometimes because resources were limited. Sometimes because the event did not seem important enough. When samples have been taken, results have often pointed back to dogs, coyotes, wildcats, or disease. But not always with satisfying clarity. There is also the issue of reporting bias. Events that sound like chupacabra are more likely to be told and retold. events that are clearly a dog attack are not exciting, and they fade away. Over time, the archive becomes skewed. So, for the rest of tonight, we will do 3 things. First, we will map the legend, tracing how the creature changed shape from Puerto Rico to the mainland. Second, we will examine the strongest physical evidence, which includes tested bodies and veterinary findings. Third, we will ask what remains, if anything, when the known explanations are applied. As you listen, keep your mind gentle. This is not a courtroom. It is a quiet room with a file folder on the table. We open it. We look. We do not force the evidence to say what we want. In the early Puerto Rico reports, the creature is described as upright. It has spines. It has a strange, almost reptilian look. Sometimes it is said to have a strong smell. Sometimes it is said to have glowing eyes. In the later mainland reports, the creature is almost always a hairless dog-like animal. The shift is dramatic. If this were a real species spreading across regions, you would expect some continuity. You might expect similar footprints, similar skulls, similar behavior. Instead, what we see is a continuity of the name and the fear, not the body. This leads many investigators to a simple conclusion. Chupacabra is not one thing. It is a basket. When people find an unexplained animal death, they put it in the basket. When they see a strange animal, they put it in the basket. Yet even a basket can sometimes contain a real object. A rumor can start from a real event. So we keep going. Consider the term goat sucker. It implies feeding. But most reports describe killings, not feeding. Many bodies were left behind. If a creature were feeding, it might return, or it might consume tissue. Dogs often kill and do not eat much. This is a known behavior. It is sometimes called surplus killing. A dog enters a pen, the animals panic, the dog bites, and the dog keeps biting. It is not hunger. It is drive and chaos. A coyote, on the other hand, often takes an animal away or eats on sight. A big cat may drag a kill to cover. So when someone finds several goats dead and not eaten, a dog is a strong suspect. But then why the focus on puncture wounds and blood? Because puncture wounds are simple. They look like a signature. 2 holes can feel like a calling card. In reality, punctures are common. The key is whether there is crushing and tearing around them. Many dog attacks leave ragged wounds, but if the dog has a strong bite and holds, the holes can be clean. In veterinary reports of livestock predation, the pattern of hemorrhage under the skin matters. If the animal was alive during the bite, there will be bleeding into the tissue. If the animal was already dead when bitten, there may be little. This is one reason fast examination matters. It can show what happened first. Now, one of the most persuasive kinds of evidence for a layperson is a photograph of a strange corpse. A hairless creature with grey skin and long teeth looks like a monster. But when you strip away fur and healthy muscle, many animals look wrong. A raccoon with mange looks like a goblin. A fox with mange looks like a sick little wolf. The 2004 to 2010 era produced many of these photos, and they became the new face of the Chupacabra. If we ask what is the best evidence from this era, the answer is the DNA tests. And the DNA tests keep landing on the same result: canids. So in terms of hard evidence, the best supported identity of the Chupacabra in the modern mainland sense is a coyote or dog with mange. But many people are not satisfied because they are thinking of the older Puerto Rico creature. So we return once more to Puerto Rico and we ask a hard question. Were the early reports also misidentified animals? Puerto Rico has dogs. It has feral dogs. It also has primates in some contexts, but not in a way that fits the story. It has iguanas, but an iguana does not kill goats. It has bats, but bats do not do this. A feral dog can be seen briefly at night, standing with 4 legs up on a fence or on a carcass. In low light, a dog can look upright. If the dog has wet fur, it can look spiny. Also, people often report seeing the creature after hearing about it. Once the idea is present, ambiguous sights become clearer in the direction of the idea. This is not mocking. It is human. Now, there is one more factor that made the Puerto Rico report style look alien. Some people describe the creature as having large eyes and a smooth head. If someone sees a dog with mange and skin disease, the face can look smooth and the eyes can look larger because of hair loss around the face. In a flashlight beam, eyes can shine, so a sick dog seen in fear could create a strange memory. But the Puerto Rico creature was often described as not canine at all. It was described as something closer to a reptile or a kangaroo. Here, the influence of pop culture may matter. A person who has seen a movie creature may use its shape as a template. And this is where the strongest evidence for a truly unknown creature becomes thin. Still, there are a few cases that investigators sometimes highlight as more puzzling. These are cases where there were repeated attacks over weeks, where fences were intact, where dogs in the area were not known to be aggressive, and where the wound patterns seemed consistent. Even in those cases, the usual suspects can persist. A single dog can learn to jump fences. A single coyote can return. A human can also kill animals, though that is rarer. Sometimes the most unsettling answer is that there is no single answer. Different events had different causes, but they were all named Chupacabra. Now, since you asked for everything on the Chupacabra and the best evidence, we will build a full file. We will cover the timeline, the geography, the physical evidence, and the cultural evidence. In the early timeline, the first major wave is 1995 Puerto Rico. Then reports spread through the Caribbean and into Latin America. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the name was widely known. Then, in the mid-2000s, the internet brought a new wave, the hairless canid photos. The legend adapted to the new medium. In Puerto Rico, the Chupacabra was a night stalker, almost like a small alien. In Texas, it became a sick coyote. Now think about the livestock, because the livestock are the physical anchor. Goats, sheep, and chickens are vulnerable. They are often kept in pens. At night, they cannot run far. A dog can kill quickly. When a farmer finds an animal dead, the farmer may not have the tools to examine the body deeply, so the cause is guessed. One common claim in Chupacabra cases is that there was no blood around the body. In reality, when an animal dies, the heart stops pumping. Blood pressure drops. If a predator kills by biting the throat and holding, there may not be a large blood spill. The blood stays in the body. Also, if the animal is found on dry ground, blood can soak in quickly, especially at night. So the absence of visible blood is not strong evidence for blood feeding. Another claim is that there were strange puncture marks, sometimes evenly spaced. A dog has 2 main upper canines. The spacing can be measured, and if someone measured it carefully, we could compare. But often, people measured by eye, or they did not measure at all. Now, there are a few rare animals that do feed on blood, like vampire bats, but their bite marks are small and their feeding is slow. They do not kill goats in one night. They also live in certain regions and leave a specific pattern. So the name goatsucker is misleading. It implies a vampire. A more accurate term, based on most reports, would be goat killer. Now, we will explore one of the most common sources of confusion: scavengers. A predator kills, then scavengers arrive. A vulture, a dog, a rat, ants. The body changes. The scene changes. Wounds can be enlarged. Tissue can be removed. If a farmer arrives later, they see a body that does not match the kill. This can make a normal predation event look supernatural. Now, take a breath and let the file settle. We will continue in the next section with a closer look at the strongest DNA cases and what they tell us about the mainland Chupacabra. In the United States, the strongest modern evidence comes from cases where the animal itself was collected. It is not glamorous evidence. It is a dead animal on a tarp, a careful photo of teeth, a lab form, and a DNA result. But that is how real identification works. One famous example, often discussed online, is sometimes called the blue dog of Texas, a hairless creature photographed after being shot on a ranch. People circulated the image as a chupacabra. Later, tests indicated it was a canid, usually reported as a coyote or a coyote-dog mix, suffering from severe mange. In another case, a hairless canid was found in the southern United States and tested by a university lab. Again, the genetic signature matched a coyote. The strange look came from disease, not from unknown biology. If you want the best evidence for what many people are seeing when they say chupacabra today, these cases are it. The evidence is repeatable. Mange can be confirmed by skin scraping. The anatomy is canid. The DNA is canid. It is worth slowing down and picturing what mange does. A healthy coyote has a thick coat. That coat hides the body shape. It hides the tail shape. It hides the muscle lines. The fur also makes the animal look larger and more familiar. When mange takes the fur, the animal becomes thin and sharp. The spine and ribs show. The head looks too big. The skin can darken or turn pale and thick in patches. The tail can look like a rat tail. The ears can look too large. Also, a sick animal may lose fear. It may wander into yards. It may move slowly. It may stand still when seen. This makes it feel unnatural, almost like a creature that does not belong. Now think about how humans interpret sickness in animals. We often read it as monstrous. We do not like seeing animals in pain. Our minds push away from it. A label like chupacabra can be a way to make the sight feel less like disease and more like a story. So the best evidence, in the mainland sense, supports a simple conclusion. Many chupacabra sightings are coyotes, but the best evidence for the core claim that something attacks livestock in unusual ways requires us to look at livestock death reports as well. In a normal predator attack, you can often tell the likely attacker by the pattern. Dogs often bite and tear. They may leave many wounds. They may kill more than they can eat. Coyotes often target the throat, and they may drag the animal. They may eat at the belly first. Big cats often leave punctures, and they may crush the windpipe. They may drag the carcass into cover. Birds of prey target small animals and often leave talon marks. But there is overlap, and that overlap is where legends grow. A farmer can find a goat dead with 2 punctures and little visible blood and think vampire. Another farmer can find 3 chickens dead with small holes and think poison. Another can find 10 goats dead and think monster. To be fair, there are also rare events that can mimic an attack, lightning can kill animals in groups. Certain diseases can cause sudden death. Toxic plants and pesticides can kill quickly. Then scavengers arrive and leave marks, so the dead body can be an unreliable witness. Now, move south again into Mexico, because this is where the Chupacabra story remained strong for many years. In some Mexican reports, the Chupacabra is described as a small grey creature, sometimes with spines, sometimes with wings. In other reports, it is described as dog-like. The description depends on the region and on what media is popular at the time. Sometimes, in these reports, there are claims that the animals were found with a single clean hole or a small set of holes, and that the internal organs were normal, but the blood was missing. If we treat that as a hypothesis, we can ask what test would confirm it. A pathologist could check for anemia signs in tissue. They could check for hemorrhage. They could weigh organs. They could test blood residues. They could check blood inside the heart chambers. They could check the ground for pooled blood. In most cases, these steps were not done. That does not prove the claim is false, but it means we cannot treat it as confirmed. So, in terms of best evidence, we have to be honest. The best evidence is still weak for the vampire claim. But there is one kind of evidence that has value even when it is not decisive, and that is consistent behavior across locations. Across many Chupacabra reports, you see the same ideas. Night attacks, small farm animals, neck wounds, fear that the killer is not a normal predator. This pattern is exactly what you would expect from normal predation combined with rumor. So the best evidence for a monster is not in the pattern, but in any truly anomalous detail. What could count as anomalous? A footprint that does not match any known animal in that region, documented clearly with a scale. A bite pattern that does not match known predators, measured precisely. A recovered tooth or claw that cannot be matched. A body with DNA that does not match known species. We do not have these in a strong, public, repeatable way. Now we can talk about one more widely known explanation for many cases: misidentification of common predators combined with misunderstanding of blood. When an animal dies, blood does not remain bright and visible. It darkens, it pools, it clots, it soaks into soil. If the kill was fast, there may be little external blood. If a predator punctures and then pulls back, the holes can close and the skin can look neat. If the body is found later, the tissue can dry, making the wound edges look cleaner. So the vampire look can be a trick. Now, what about the reports of animals found with no signs of struggle? A small goat can be killed quickly. A chicken can be killed without much noise. Also, in a pen, the animal cannot run far. The struggle can happen inside, leaving little outside. So lack of a struggle is not strong evidence. Now, we should include the way the legend adapted to technology. In the 1990s, people learned about Chupacabra from TV and newspapers. In the 2000s, people learned from internet forums and email chains. In the 2010s and 2020s, people learned from social media clips. Each medium rewards a certain kind of story. TV rewards a dramatic eyewitness. Forums reward strange photos and personal testimony. Social media rewards short, shocking images. This means the legend is always being selected for maximum impact, not maximum truth. Yet the core anxieties remain the same. People want to protect their animals. People feel vulnerable at night. People feel that authorities do not listen. Now, we can also include the way rural communities share information. In many areas, farmers talk. They warn each other. They tell each other what they saw. This is normal and healthy. But it also means a label can spread fast. If one person says Chupacabra, the next person may use the same word, even if their event was different. So, what is the best evidence for the Chupacabra, in the sense of evidence that something real happened? The best evidence is that livestock were killed, and that the deaths were sometimes not explained to the satisfaction of the owners. The best evidence is also that there are real animals, like mange coyotes, that look unnatural and that can be killed and displayed. But the best evidence for a new unknown predator is not there. Now, we will dig into a few specific episodes that are often cited. One episode is the 1995 Puerto Rico wave, where many farmers reported animals killed. The evidence here is mainly testimony. Another episode is the 2000s Texas wave of hairless canids. The evidence here includes bodies and DNA. Another is the spread into Central and South America, where reports became part of local folklore. In each case, the story is a mix of fact and myth. Now, we will talk about the strongest single piece of modern evidence, and it is not a monster. It is the lab. When a suspected Chupacabra corpse is tested and the result is coyote, it becomes a hard anchor. It tells us that the name Chupacabra does not guarantee anything. It also tells us that people are looking at real animals and calling them by a myth, and it suggests that if there is any unknown creature, it is hiding in a sea of misidentified coyotes. Now, that does not mean we stop. It means we sharpen the standard. If a future case appears and the body is collected and the DNA does not match known canids, then we would have something. Until then, the best evidence for Chupacabra as a creature is weak. But the best evidence for Chupacabra as a story is strong. It is a story that has a clear origin in the 1990s. It spread across language borders. It changed shape. It attached itself to real events, especially livestock losses. It blended with science fiction, and it survived. Now, we will explore why the story survives, because that is part of the investigation too. A myth survives when it solves a problem. Chupacabra solves the problem of uncertainty. It gives a name to unexplained loss. It gives a target to anger. It gives a community a shared warning. And it gives the media a hook. Now listen carefully to how the story is told. Often, it starts with a body found at dawn. Then it adds one strange detail. Then it adds a sighting. Then it adds fear. Then it adds the name. After the name is spoken, the story becomes larger. If you remove the name, it becomes a report of livestock predation. This is why names matter. Now, there are also claims that the Chupacabra is connected to government experiments or to secret labs. These claims are not supported by evidence in public records, but they fit the mood of the time. In the 1990s, there were many popular stories about aliens and cover-ups. So a creature with spikes and large eyes can slide easily into that mental world. This does not help us identify an animal, but it helps us understand why certain descriptions are repeated. Now, to keep the investigation grounded, we can list what is actually known. Known: goats and other animals were killed in multiple regions. Known: some carcasses showed puncture wounds. Known: some alleged Chupacabra corpses were tested and were canids. Known: mange can make a canid look strange. Known: pop culture and media influenced public imagery. unknown. Whether any single event involved an unknown animal, unknown. Whether the Puerto Rico bipedal creature description corresponds to any real animal, unknown. How many cases were misread because of scavenging and delayed discovery? Now, we can take a calm look at the best arguments from believers, because fairness matters. Believers often say, "I have lived here, I know the predators, and this was different. The wounds were too clean. There was no blood. The animal was not eaten. The attacks happened again and again. I saw the creature." These statements come from lived experience. They deserve respect. But experience is not always precise. It can be misled by unusual conditions. A dog with mange can look like something new. A coyote can kill without eating much. A carcass can look bloodless without being drained. A frightened eyewitness can misjudge size and shape. So the believer statements are not enough. Now, we can also take a calm look at the best arguments from skeptics. Skeptics often say, "There is no body of an unknown animal. The DNA cases are coyotes. The Puerto Rico image resembles a movie. Predation and scavenging explain most wounds. The story is a modern myth." These statements also deserve respect, and they are often supported by stronger evidence. But skepticism can also become too quick. It can forget that rural people can see real rare events, like an escaped animal, or a dog pack, or a disease outbreak. So the best stance is a quiet balance. Assume ordinary causes first, but keep the door open to new evidence. Now, we will continue with a deeper look at bite marks and why the neck is so central in these stories. Predators target the neck because it is efficient. The neck holds the airway and major blood vessels. A bite there can drop an animal fast. So a dead goat with neck punctures is a normal outcome of predation. But the neck also carries symbolic weight. A bite at the throat feels like a vampire bite, so the mind jumps. This is how a normal predation scene becomes a monster story. Now, picture a farmer in the early hours, holding a flashlight. The body is stiff. The eyes are open. There is fear and anger and confusion. In that moment, the story writes itself. And once written, it rarely unwrites. We will now move forward, toward the edge of the file, where the rare details sit. We will look at the reports that mention unusual tracks, unusual smells, and unusual sounds, and we will measure those against what is known about dogs, coyotes, and other animals. Tracks are one of the oldest kinds of evidence in monster stories. A track feels objective. It is a shape in mud. It can be photographed. It can be measured. But tracks are also one of the easiest kinds of evidence to misunderstand. A dog track in soft mud can spread and look wider. A partial print can look like a different foot. A track made at a run can look longer. A double step can look like a strange creature with an odd pattern. In some Chupacabra reports, people described 3-toed prints, or prints that looked almost human. If those prints were documented with clear photos and a ruler, they would be valuable. But most of the time, we get only a description, and a description is not a measurement. There are also cases where people said fences were not broken, yet animals were killed inside. A dog can slip through a gap that a human does not notice. A coyote can climb and jump. A human can also open a gate by mistake. So an intact fence does not prove the attacker was supernatural. Now there are a few reports that mention unusual smells, a sulfur smell, a strong musky odor. Many animals have strong smells. A wet dog can smell sharp. A scared goat can smell sharp. A skunk can leave a lingering signal. A A carcass itself can smell strange. In the night, smells also blend with humidity and plants. So smell is a weak kind of evidence. Now, we should also include the possibility of hoaxes. Not all reports are honest. Some are jokes. Some are attempts to get attention. Some are misunderstandings repeated as fact. The Chupacabra, as a famous name, attracts this. A person can post a photo of a hairless dog and claim it is a monster. A person can carve a story onto a normal animal death. This does not mean every report is a hoax, but it means we cannot treat the archive as clean. Now we can take a step back and ask a practical question. If the Chupacabra were a real breeding species, what should we see by now? We should see consistent bodies. We should see roadkill. We should see bones. We should see captured animals. We should see clear DNA results. We do not. This is one of the strongest skeptical arguments. Now, if instead the Chupacabra is a label for mange coyotes and for unexplained kills, then the evidence makes sense. We see canids. We see disease. We see normal predation. We see rumor. Now, what about the best evidence that keeps believers convinced? It is often the early Puerto Rico wave, because it has a concentrated burst of reports. It has eyewitness descriptions that feel vivid. It has a sense of a creature moving through a region, and it has a strong emotional imprint. If you want to be maximally fair to that wave, you might say this. Something unusual may have happened in Puerto Rico in 1995. It could have been a dog pack. It could have been a disease outbreak combined with scavenging. It could have been a rare predator event. It could have been a mixture. The name Chupacabra then formed around that mixture, and once the name existed, it began to pull other events into itself. This is a common pattern in modern legends. Now, there is one more piece that often enters Chupacabra discussions, and it is the idea of the perfect bite, the surgical bite. People sometimes say the wounds look like they were made by a tool. In some cases, this may be exaggeration. In some cases, it may come from seeing two holes that are very round. Canine teeth can make round holes. Also, if the skin is thick, the puncture can be clean. And if there is no tearing, the holes can look like they were punched. So the surgical look is not strong evidence. Now we can talk about the claim that animals were drained, and we can treat it as a physical question. How much blood does a goat have? A goat has a significant amount, and if it were removed, it would likely leave signs. Also, blood is heavy. An animal drained of most of its blood would weigh less. In a proper investigation, you could weigh and compare. This is not typically done. So the drained claim remains mostly a story element. Now the best evidence for Chupacabra, in the sense of evidence that can be checked, still points back to normal animals. So what do we do with the legend? We can treat it as two intertwined things. A real-world problem, livestock losses, a human response, a myth that explains and dramatizes those losses, and within that response, a set of images that evolve. First, the spiny biped of Puerto Rico, then the hairless canid of Texas. Now, in more recent years, the term has become even broader. People use it for any strange animal. If a raccoon has mange, someone calls it Chupacabra. If a dog is hairless, someone calls it Chupacabra. So the term is drifting. That drift itself is evidence that we are dealing with a label. Now, let us gather the best evidence and lay it on the table. One last time, clean and simple. Evidence set 1. Livestock were killed in Puerto Rico in the 1990s. Many people reported unusual wounds. This is supported by many accounts. but the physical documentation is limited. Evidence set 2. Multiple alleged Chupacabra bodies on the mainland were tested. The results pointed to coyotes, dogs, and hybrids, often with mange. This is well supported. Evidence set 3. Many reports across Mexico and the Americas repeat the same themes of puncture wounds and bloodless bodies, but these are mostly testimony without lab confirmation. Evidence set 4. The imagery of the Chupacabra shows signs of being shaped by movies, TV, and internet culture. When you weigh these sets, the heaviest is set 2. It is physical, tested, and repeatable. So if we define Chupacabra as what people are actually finding when they say they found one, the best evidence says a canid with mange. If we define Chupacabra as a separate unknown creature that drinks blood, the best evidence is not strong. Now, that conclusion can feel disappointing. People like mysteries. But there is still something haunting here. The haunting part is not a monster in the woods. It is the way fear spreads and the way a name can change what people see. It is the way a sick animal can become a creature of legend. And it is the way a dead goat can become a national story. If you live in a rural area and you have animals, the practical lesson is not about myths. It is about protection, secure pens, good fencing, lights if needed, guard animals where appropriate, and quick documentation when something happens. Because if you want the truth, you need evidence early. Now, as we close the file, we will not mock the witnesses. Most people who tell these stories are not trying to fool anyone. They are trying to explain something that felt wrong, and that feeling matters. But the archive also asks for standards. A story is not a specimen. A photograph is not a genetic test. A rumor is not a report. So tonight, the best evidence points toward a grounded answer. The Chupacabra, most of the time, is a name given to ordinary events with an extraordinary frame. And when the animal itself is captured and tested, it tends to be a coyote or dog, often sick with mange. The mystery, then, is not a hidden species. The mystery is the human mind and the way it builds monsters in the dark. Let the file close gently. Let the pen on the paper stop. Let the night return to quiet. Before we end, there is one more angle that matters, because it is where belief and evidence can meet. It is the work of ordinary experts, veterinarians, wildlife biologists, animal control officers, and lab technicians. When they look at a carcass, they do not start with monsters or movies. They start with anatomy. They look at the wound edges. They look at bruising under the skin. They look at broken bones. They look at the pattern of tooth spacing. They look at where the animal bled and where it did not. They look at the tracks around the pen, and when possible, they take samples: hair, saliva, skin scrapings, faces. This kind of work is quiet, and it is not always available in rural places, but it is the only path that can cut through legend. If you want to understand why Chupacabra stories often feel convincing, it helps to understand how messy predation scenes really are. Even when the attacker is known, the scene can look confusing. A dog may chase an animal into a fence. The fence leaves marks. The animal bruises itself. The dog bites and lets go. The animal runs, then collapses. Then the dog returns and bites again. Then, after death, other animals come in. So, the final body can show many marks that did not cause the death. A person can look at those marks and think multiple attackers, or an attacker with strange tools. But it was only one dog and time. Another reason these stories stick is that people often assume a predator must leave a clear feeding sign. If the goat was not eaten, then the predator must be different. But dogs and coyotes do not always eat immediately. They may be scared off. They may be disturbed. They may kill for reasons that are not hunger. So a lack of feeding does not remove ordinary predators. Now, if we want to be precise about what the best evidence is, we can define it as the closest thing to a confirmed data point. A confirmed data point is a case where an alleged chupacabra was physically in hand, was examined, and was genetically tested. Those data points point to coyotes, dogs, and hybrids. So the best evidence for the chupacabra as a literal creature with a body is evidence that the label is being used for known animals. But there is also a second kind of best evidence, and it is about origin. The 1995 Puerto Rico wave is the best evidence for the birth of the legend as a cultural event. It shows the moment the name entered the world. It shows the moment the image formed. It shows the moment the story gained motion. And if you want a single detail that feels like a pivot, it is the combination of dramatic eyewitness accounts with media attention. Now, a careful listener might ask, is it possible that there was an unusual animal in Puerto Rico in 1995, even if later cases are mange coyotes? Yes, it is possible. An escaped exotic animal could appear. A sick animal could behave in a strange way. A rare predator could be in a place people did not expect. But possibility is not proof. The archive is not trying to remove wonder. It is trying to keep the standards clear. And the standard is this: to claim a new creature, you need a body, or at least a tissue sample, that can be tested and verified. Without that, you have a story. Now there is one more thing that belongs in this file, because you asked for the best evidence, not only the best debunk. The best evidence for mystery, such as it is, lies in the gaps. The gaps are the cases where animals died. The owners were sure it was unusual, and no proper forensic work was done. In those gaps, anything can live. A dog pack, a coyote, a wildcat, a human, a disease, or, in the minds of some, something unknown. The problem is that the gaps cannot be weighed, they cannot be tested, they cannot be repeated, so they cannot carry the claim. This is why Chupacabra remains a legend. It is not because people are foolish. It is because the evidence that would settle it does not exist for the strongest claims. So if you ever hear a new report and you want to treat it seriously, the practical answer is simple. Document quickly. Photograph wounds with a ruler in the frame. Photograph tracks with a scale. Secure the area. Contact a veterinarian or wildlife officer. If a body is found, do not destroy it. Preserve it so it can be tested. This is how a legend becomes a case. Now, with that final note in the file, the room can go quiet. The papers are stacked. The lamp is low. The last question is not, what is the Chupacabra? The last question is, what do we do when the night feels uncertain? We do what humans have always done. We tell a story, and if we are careful, we also keep a record. One last slow pass through the strongest concrete points, stated plainly. Point 1. When people claim they found a Chupacabra body in the United States, the bodies that were actually collected and tested have matched known canids. Coyotes, dogs, hybrids, often with mange. That is not rumor. That is the result of identification work. Point 2. The classic vampire claim that many animals were drained of blood through neat punctures. is not supported by strong veterinary documentation and the public record. It is mostly reported by observation after the fact, without lab confirmation. Point 3. The early Puerto Rico wave is the best supported origin point for the legend as a named creature. The witness descriptions were vivid and repeated. The media attention was intense. The story moved fast. But the physical evidence from that wave, as preserved today, is thin. Point 4. Normal predation can look abnormal when a body is found late, when scavengers have altered it, when the ground absorbs blood, and when the person finding the body is shocked and angry. Point 5. A strange-looking animal does not require a new species. Disease can reshape familiar bodies into something that looks like it does not belong. Now place those points together and you get the most careful answer. The Chupacabra is real as a story, real as a name, and real as a pattern of fear around livestock loss. And in many modern cases, it is also real as an animal. But that animal is a known predator, usually a canid. If there is anything beyond that, it remains unproven. And that is not the end of wonder. It is the beginning of good questions. Because the world is still full of strange nights. It is full of places where fences fail. It is full of animals with sickness that changes them. It is full of rare events that happen once and leave only a memory. So when someone says Chupacabra, you can hear two things at once. You can hear the legend with its spikes and shadows, and you can hear the real work of living close to nature, where animals die and where humans try to make sense of it. Let that double hearing be enough. Let the mind relax. Let the archive remain open but quiet. If you want a short list of what to watch for in future claims, here it is, and it is simple. A future case becomes serious when it includes at least one of these: a body or a tissue sample preserved for testing, clear photos of wounds taken immediately, with a ruler or coin for scale, a documented bite pattern that can be compared to known predators, tracks photographed clearly with a scale, plus a clean chain of custody for the photos, multiple independent witnesses who saw the same creature under good light, close enough to describe it without guessing. And if the claim is about blood, then a proper veterinary examination, blood volume estimates, internal hemorrhage checks, toxicology if needed. Otherwise, the case stays in the same category as most of the archive, a story anchored to a real loss, but not anchored to a confirmed identity. And that is fine. A legend does not need to become a lab specimen to have meaning. It can mean vigilance. It can mean the deep human need to name what hurts. It can mean the way a community warns itself. It can also mean how easily we can confuse a sick animal for something other. So the quiet takeaway is not to believe everything and not to mock everything. The quiet takeaway is to demand better evidence when the claim is big, and to treat people kindly when their loss is real. Now the lamp is low. The file goes back into its box. The night outside the window is still, and somewhere, far from the internet and the headlines, the real landscape continues. Coyotes move through brush. Dogs roam when they are not kept. Goats sleep in pens. Owls pass over fields. Mites spread through fur. A farmer wakes early, checks a latch, listens for a sound, and hopes the night stayed calm. In that everyday world, a myth like Chupacabra is not only entertainment, it is a signal flare for worry. And it is also a reminder that we live alongside forces we do not fully control. The archive does not take sides with fear or with ridicule. It takes sides with careful looking. So we leave the Chupacabra exactly where it belongs, between the known and the unknown, between the wound and the story, between the pen and the dark. And if you ever find yourself tempted to decide too quickly, either way, remember what this file taught us. Some mysteries collapse under light. Some stay standing only because the light never reached them. And some are not one thing at all, but many events wearing one name. That is the shape of Chupacabra in the record. Now, let the mind loosen, let the breathing slow, let the story drift into quiet. The box closes, the latch holds. The night continues, calm and unclaimed, outside. This was a quiet archive story, where the story ends, sleep begins,